Greetings, everyone. This is Michael Jackman, Senior Lecturer in Writing at Indiana University Southeast, and this podcast is called Writing the Erotic. The textbook I often use, called The Poet's Companion, has a chapter called Writing the Erotic, and I assign it because what young poet, or old one for that matter, wouldn't love the opportunity to explore a subject that might seem taboo? In this case, to express the erotic in a poem. But I do think their chapter could have done a better job of setting up the writing situation, which is why I made this podcast. So, what does it mean to write the erotic? Is it the same thing as writing about sex? The Poet's Companion seems to think so. In their chapter, Writing the Erotic, Kim Adonisio and her co-writer Dorianne Laux state, "It's a difficult task to write openly and well about sex." Yeah, we would agree with that. But there you have it. Writing the erotic is writing about sex. But is it really? And if it is sex the goal of the poem, or is the goal something else? We're going to have to look elsewhere for guidance because the chapter doesn't really say. Turns out it's hard to even know what sex is. But if we're going to write about it, shouldn't we know? So what is sex? This question may seem obvious, but it isn't. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it in terms of penetration, whether by a penis as an intercourse or by a finger, a tongue, or something else. That's also the legal definition of sex according to my research, penetration. But if you're writing about sex, writing the erotic, is the goal to write about penetration? Is that the sum total of what it means to have sex? I don't think so. And I don't think you do either. But again, what is sex? Does the definition fit how people having sex actually define it? A 2015 study in the Journal of Sex Research asked about 600 undergraduates who identified as heterosexual males and females what behaviors counted as, quote, having sex. Here's what they said. 92% of those undergraduates thought deep kissing was definitely not sex. About 5% thought it was probably not sex. 2% thought it was probably sex. And a small remainder, less than 1%, thought that deep kissing was definitely sex. I'm just going to mention 4 more of the 21 behaviors studied. About 70% thought stimulating someone's nipples counted as definitely not sex. And 3.5% thought it was definitely sex. That leaves the rest in the middle in some gray area and not sure whether it was sex or not. About 41% thought manually giving someone an orgasm was definitely not sex. And about 14% thought it was, leaving 45% of undergraduates not sure whether manual stimulation to orgasm was sex or not. When it came to oral, about 22% of undergraduates thought getting or giving an orgasm this way was definitely not sex, and 31% thought it was definitely sex. That leaves 47% of undergraduates studied not sure if orally stimulated orgasms were sex or not. Finally, there was an area that almost all undergraduates could agree on: intercourse, penis, with an orgasm. Definitely sex, 95%. Nevertheless, that leaves 5% of 600 people, or 30 undergraduates, not sure if that was sex or not, or disagreeing. What can we as poets learn from this fascinating and to me a little bizarre study data? First, poets, if you're going to write about sex, your audience may not even think what you're writing about is sex. Wow! Second, the experience of sex is definitely worth exploring in poetry. Not so much for the sex, although I'm sure that can be part of it, but because we're all interested in what that experience is. I think mostly for the human perceptions, experiences, and emotions that come along with it. But now let's get back to the original question. Is writing the erotic the same thing as writing about sex? Well, to answer this question, I turn to an essay by the awesome and towering poetic figure in poetry, Audre Lorde. Here are some excerpts from her essay, Uses of the Erotic as Power. By the way, while Lord is speaking specifically to women, I do think we can apply her words across all genders. And I want to just admit that in picking out these excerpts, I distorted her message for the sake of brevity, leaving out her critique of politics and patriarchy. So if you want to read the whole essay, contact me and I'll send it to you. Lord writes, "The erotic offers a well of replenishing and provocative force to the woman who does not fear its revelation nor succumb to the belief that sensation is enough. For this reason, we have often turned away from the exploration and consideration of the erotic as a source of power and information, confusing it with its opposite, the pornographic." And Lord gives a great definition of the difference between the erotic and the pornographic. Pornography, she says, emphasizes sensation without feeling. In other words, it's emotionally and experientially lacking, even hollow. We don't want to write about that. That's not an experience that we explore. In contrast, she writes, "The erotic is the nurturer or nursemaid of all our deepest knowledge. The erotic functions for me in several ways," she says, and the first is in providing the power which comes from sharing deeply any pursuit with another person. The sharing of joy, whether physical, emotional, psychic, or intellectual, forms a bridge between the sharers, which can be the basis for understanding much of what is not shared between them and lessens the threat of difference. I find this amazing, for she says, "Not only do we touch our most profoundly creative source, but we do that which is female and self-affirming in the face of a racist, patriarchal, and anti-erotic society." So, what is erotic poetry? What might I be asking you to explore? For Audre Lorde, erotic means an outpouring of electric feelings. It comes from chaos. It is creative power, creative energy, the force that nurtures our deepest knowledge. Eros, as the Greeks called it, is the kind of power we express when we're intimate, when we share, however you define that activity. It can be physical, emotional, psychic, or intellectual. It forms a bridge which becomes the basis for understanding and lessens the threat of difference. It's transgressive and suppressed and mistakenly miscategorized as pornographic. Well, if this is the case, by asking you to consider writing the erotic, am I asking you to write about sex the way Adonisio and Laux see it? Well, Eros can be expressed through sex, to be sure, but it calls for a rethinking of sex, not just as whether or not it's a set of specific behaviors, but as a sharing of minds and bodies and experiences. Let's look at some actual poetry. I'm going to read 3 poems that are not in the textbook, and you can follow along. The first is called Recreation by Audre Lorde. Actually, the title is a pun. You could read it as recreation or as recreation. Your choice. Recreation. Coming together, it is easier to work after our bodies meet. Paper and pen neither care nor profit whether we write or not, but as your body moves under my hands, charged and waiting, we cut the leash. You create me against your thighs, hilly with images, moving through our word countries. My body writes into your flesh the poem you make of me. Touching you, I catch midnight as moon fires set in my throat. I love your flesh into blossom. I made you and take you made into me. Our next example is from the poet Adrienne Rich, and it's called The Floating Poem. Whatever happens with us, your body will haunt mine, tender, delicate, your lovemaking like the half-curled frond of the fiddlehead fern in forests just washed by sun, your traveled, generous thighs between which my whole face has come and come, the innocence and wisdom of the place my tongue has found there, the live, insatiate dance of your nipples in my mouth, your touch on me, firm, protective, searching me out, your strong tongue and slender fingers reaching where I had been waiting years for you in my rose-wet cave. Whatever happens, this is. And finally, in a quite different mood and form, the magnificent E. E. Cummings with his poem, I like my body when it is with your. I like my body when it is with your body. It is so quite new a thing, muscles better and nerves more. I like your body. I like what it does. I like its hows. I like to feel the spine of your body and its bones and the trembling, firm smoothness, and which I will again and again and again kiss. I like kissing this and that of you. I like slowly stroking the shocking fuzz of your electric fur, and what is it comes over parting flesh, and eyes big love crumbs, and possibly I like the thrill of under me, you so quite new. So that's it for today, poets. I hope this podcast has helped sort out what you might do when you're asked to write the erotic. I'm Michael Jackman, Senior Lecturer in Writing at Indiana University Southeast, wishing you good writing.